possible collusion with the state of Russia. David Brooks of the New York Times, who despises Trump and says so all the time, even he is getting suspicious of the whole enterprise. Here's what he said.
I'm actually getting more uncomfortable with this whole deal, thinking that maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. And I'm bothered by the lack of emerging evidence about the underlying crime, that there was actually collusion or coordination between the Trump White House. I'm just afraid we're being swallowed up by the politics of scandal when there's less and less evidence that they actually colluded. And maybe that'll come out, but so far it hasn't, and it bothers me.
So what is this investigation about, and when, if ever, does it end? Congressman Trey Gowdy just took over as chairman of the House Oversight Committee. He also serves on the House Intelligence Committee, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, sir. Hope you're feeling better.
I feel vigorous.
Good.
But I have lost track of the point of all this. What is the point of this investigation, just to remind those of us who are following at home?
Well, Tucker, the hyper-focus on collusion is not Congress's fault. I would say folks in your line of work have been focused on collusion much more than certainly Republican members of the House. There are four things that we're looking at. Russian active measures, which a subset of that would be collusion. The U.S. response back in 2016, which has nothing to do with Trump. That's an Obama administration response. And then importantly, the leaks and the unmasking, which have everything to do with the reauthorization of certain surveillance programs. So there are four things that the House Intel Committee is looking at. One of those involves Russian active measures, and a subset of that would be collusion, not just between Mr. Trump and the Russians, but any American and the Russians. So the hyper-focus on collusion and conspiracy and coordination is not mine. I'm interested in all four tranches.
When will we know what happened? When will this wrap up, do you think?
When the last witness is interviewed, and that is a legitimate criticism. I was ready months ago. There are only 6 members of the House Intel Committee that are conducting the witness interviews. Only 6, so it's not the whole committee. I was ready 2 months ago to start interviewing witnesses. We are slowly beginning to do that. We have another one tomorrow. Our goal is to have this done in a perfect world before Labor Day. We've interviewed everyone, because keep in mind, if we don't interview every witness, then some skeptics are going to say the one witness you did not interview is the one that has all the knowledge. So you have to interview everyone, and then at the end you can discuss what evidence exists or does not exist.
So you said a minute ago the press was keeping the idea of collusion at the forefront of the public consciousness, which is, of course, true. I think you've been responsible in your public statements on this. We've had members of the committee on this show who have openly suggested, certainly implied, that there was collusion. There's clearly a political agenda here, and I'm not flacking for the Trump administration. Obviously, the president's hurt himself with his grotesquely counterproductive tweeting on the subject. But as a factual matter, there is a political agenda here, an axe being ground by Democrats. And doesn't that kind of color the whole investigation and make it maybe less useful from the public's perspective?
Well, it certainly may, the congressional part. I think Robert Mueller has a long, distinguished career that is essentially apolitical. And I think that people are going to be able to have confidence in the outcome of that investigation. With respect to Congress, we have a tendency to politicize almost everything, Tucker, and you're exactly right. There are members of both the House and the Senate who talk about, here's my favorite, I've seen evidence that's more than circumstantial but not direct, which, by the way, is tautological. There's no way it can be more than circumstantial but not direct. And then one of the members of the committee said this week that he has seen evidence. He can't tell us what it is. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. There's no way to defend yourself against those kind of baseless, reckless accusations. So I think ultimately the public will have confidence in Robert Mueller's investigation. Whether or not they have confidence in Congress's investigation depends on how responsible we are and how we frame the issues.
So you've just taken over the chairmanship from Jason Chaffetz. How will the committee be different under you, under your leadership?
Well, there are two components to our committee, Tucker. There's oversight and then there's government reform. Oversight is always in fashion. It's always in style because of branch equity and branch equilibrium issues. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do the government reform that lots and lots of folks have been talking about for decades. So that's going to be my focus. It's going to be serious, reform-minded ideas that save money. That, you know, what frustrates people is when we have hearings on waste, fraud, and abuse, and then we do nothing about it. So I look for fewer hearings on waste, fraud, and abuse, and more work on it.
I got to say, I love the hearings, but I'd also like to see some action. I'm sure lots of our viewers agree. Mr. Chairman, thank you for coming on tonight. I appreciate
Yes, sir.
it.
Thank you, Tucker.
To buy of your Newswire reports. President Trump is preparing for a criminal investigation into former FBI Director James Comey and Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who are being accused of acting in a highly partisan manner against the Trump administration. This is sedition, obviously. 3 Republican House Oversight Committee members confirmed on Friday that Comey and Mueller are to be investigated for misleading the American people last year when they agreed to downplay the Hillary Clinton scandal and referred to the investigation as a matter, under the orders of then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Representatives Jim Jordan from Ohio, Mark Meadows from North Carolina, and Jody Hice from Georgia say that both Comey and Mueller are guilty of applying double standards when it comes to the Obama and Trump administrations. Breitbart reports, quote, "He did it willfully, he did it intentionally, and he did it at the direction of Attorney General Loretta Lynch," end quote. They wrote in a piece published on Fox News. They also said Comey misled the American people in the early weeks of the Trump administration by, quote, "furthering the perception that President Trump was under investigation when in fact he was not," end quote. And they wrote, "He again did this willfully and intentionally." They also pointed out that Comey recently admitted having a friend leak one of his memos detailing a private conversation he had with Trump after Trump fired him. Comey admitted doing so to spark the appointment of special counsel for the investigation into Russian interference and any collusion with the Trump campaign. They wrote, "That person appointed was Robert Mueller, Comey's mentor and predecessor." Quote, "The American people want justice to be blind. They want equal justice and equal protection for everyone. But Mr. Comey's actions continue to call his impartiality and the impartiality of the Holder and Lynch Justice Department into question," end quote. That's what they said. They pointed out that on May 7th, 2014, the House passed a resolution calling for a special counsel to investigate the IRS targeting of conservatives for their political beliefs. And they wrote, quote, "Comey and Attorney General Eric Holder blocked the appointment. This despite the fact that the lead investigator they assigned to the case, Barbara Bosserman, was a max-out contributor to President Obama's re-election campaign," end quote. Quote, "This is a type of unequal justice that Americans despise. No special counsel in the IRS targeting investigation. No special counsel for the Clinton email investigation. But if it's about protecting Comey's reputation and hurting President Trump, then of course there has to be a special counsel," end quote. That's what they said. They said throughout 2015 and 2016, there were calls from Congress for a special counsel for the Clinton email scandal, but the Justice Department refused that, even after it was revealed that Loretta Lynch had met privately with Bill Clinton. They were colluding, in other words, to benefit Hillary Clinton, which is of course illegal. They also said Mueller's impartiality was questionable 4 weeks after the Treasury's Inspector General released a report on the IRS targeting scandal and the Justice Department began their investigation into it. Mueller could not even answer basic questions about the investigation during testimony. They wrote, quote, "Investigating the targeting of conservatives by the IRS, which was the biggest story in the news at the time, was clearly not a priority for Mr. Mueller. As FBI director, he didn't even know who was doing what," end quote. In contrast, Mueller has handpicked a team of investigators for the Trump investigation. Quote, "You'd better believe Mr. Mueller has handpicked the exact team he wants," end quote. They wrote, and they said that team included James Carls, a partner of Wilmer Hale, was a $10,000 contributor to the House and Senate Democrats. He also has a long history of supporting Democratic presidential candidates, including Dukakis, Gore, Kerry, Obama, and Hillary Clinton. Jeannie Rhee, a senior advisor to former Attorney General Eric Holder, was an Obama and Hillary Clinton supporter. She also represented the Clinton Foundation in litigation and personally represented Hillary Clinton. Andrew Weissman, a former Justice Department official, was also an Obama contributor. Elizabeth Pregeler, a former law clerk for Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Elena Kagan, donated to both the Obama and Hillary Clinton presidential campaigns. So far, they said, of the dozen people named to Mueller's team, quote, none have similarly supported Republican presidential candidates, end quote. Shocking. So it's a biased team against Trump. They wrote, quote, the House has a responsibility to defend the deeply held American principle of equal justice under the law. That's why we believe it's time for the House to have hearings on the troubling matter of the motivation and organization of this investigation. The past actions of Mr. Mueller and Mr. Comey as part of the Holder and Lynch Justice Departments call into question their impartiality. If this investigation is to be taken seriously, it is important that the American people get the answers they deserve, end quote. All three congressmen are members of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Meadows is the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. So this is another investigation, and thank goodness it should be done. Trump prepares for criminal investigation into Comey and Mueller. This is by Sean Adel Tabatabai on your